Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy left crew and joined the revolutionary army and got harem? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Though support and follow the unknown EPSFN for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. The Straw Hats were cruising on board the Thousand Sunny sailing the New World. Despite the New World having a reputation of being a sea which is described by an experienced pirate, the warlord Gecko Moria as a true nightmare, it seemed fairly calm. The navigator believed this to be one of the calmer parts of the New World, as the weather was fair with only a few clouds. The sun was shining brightly and the weather was all around good. Indeed, it was perfect day for relaxation. Even better yet, the crew was approaching an island which they heard was known as a major shopping center. This made most of the Straw Hats happy for different reasons. Nami to go shopping for more clothes, Robin for more books, though she rarely ever was in a sour mood, Chopper for more medical books and supplies, Usopp and Frankie for their own supplies, Sanji for more food and of course, going accompanying his lovely ladies. Only Luffy, Zoro and Brook didn't seem too enthusiastic about the island. Luffy because the island is boring and the absence of adventure, Zoro because he wanted to sleep and Brook simply didn't care. I can't wait to go shopping here. I heard it was a hotspot for shopping, and I can't wait to get some new clothes along with ink and paper for my map, said an enthusiastic Nami. Indeed. I would like to accompany you, Nami-san. And I could use some new books, as well as some gardening supplies, replied a cool, collected, but obviously happy Robin with her trademark smile. I could get some supplies and spices, said Sanji. And then I could see some fine ladies while I'm at it. Melorine, Sanji said now with hearts in his eyes and a perverted look on his face. Typical love cook. Gee, like any Melorine would ever fall for that curly-eyed orc, Zoro answered Sanji and his typical sarcastic tone when dealing with the dartboard. What was that, you moss-head, Sanji replied, immediately leaving his love mode typical of anything related to the bane of his existence, the Maremo. Nothing. Go back to fantasizing, answered Zoro in a bored voice. Sanji's face was morphed into a comical angry one. Orc, finished Zoro. Arg, chief, forget it. After all, what are the chances of any woman falling for that grass stain? His ugly mug would just scare them away, and he only knows about fighting and swords, neither of which ladies like, Sanji countered in a condescending tone. That's it. The door cook was really going to get it now. Instantly Zoro leaped at Sanji with his two swords out, and Sanji naturally answered back with his legs, and the typical Zoro-Sanji brawl started. Guys, cut it out, asked Chopper timidly. While it was true that the reindeer doctor had become much more confident and sure of himself after the 2-year time skip, he was still afraid to get in the way of the monsters Zoro and Sanji. Come on, Chopper, let them be. You know how they are. Besides, what could you do against those two of all people, Usopp said to the little reindeer in an assuring voice. Oh, you're right, Usopp replied Chopper. And you really become cool, continued Chopper in an admiring voice. Usopp, feeling his ego skyrocket thanks to Chopper's praise, instantly went into Captain Usopp mode. Of course. What you think I was doing over the last 2 years? Certainly not wasting time. In fact, being on an island where everything tries to eat you certainly does wonders for you. And that isn't a lie, said Usopp in a proud voice. You were on an island that tried to eat you. Amazing, Usopp. Wait, you were lying about all those stories, haven't you, answered Chopper first in an amazed voice, and then in an accusing one. Usopp, instantly catching on, tried to deflect the blame with more outrageous and obviously untrue stories. But we can get some really good supplies here. I could use some lumber and other stuff to help maintain my super ship, said Frankie, doing his usual silly pose. I honestly have no interest in buying anything, said Brook. Okay then, Brook, then how about you stay and watch the ship then, replied Nami. Ho, I could, but I wish to go out there and see if any ladies would let me see their panties, Brook retorted with blood beginning to drip from his nose. Honestly, I should have thought, Nami shouted in an angry voice complemented by angry eyes and shark teeth. This is boring. I want to go on an adventure, whined an obviously irritated Luffy who thrilled on adventuring and danger. We can't go on adventure all the time, Straw Hat. We need to get out supplies to remain super, said Frankie. Oh well, I guess it can't be helped. Besides, I can still buy some meat, stated the Straw Hat wearing rubber man with his usual goofy grin. Typical. It's all about the meat, the crew all thought together with sweat drops. Well guys, the log doesn't set until a few days later, but let's all still be back soon. We don't want to leave the ship alone for too long, and we all have bounties, stated Nami. Okay, the crew all thought together. A few hours later, the crew all reunited after their individual errands. It was a pretty successful shopping day, but since they were going to be here for a few days, there was no need to rush, or else they wouldn't get to enjoy it. Of course, they made sure to buy enough should the marines, pirates, bounty hunters or any obstacles force them to leave immediately. Currently they were all on board the ship eating dinner. And as usual it was the typical Straw Hat chaos. In other words, Luffy stealing food from everyone else, Sanji trying and unsuccessfully trying to woo Nami and Robin with love-themed foods made specially for them. "Boy Luffy, give back my meat," shouted Usopp. "Yes, Straw Hat, I need to have my food in order to be super as usual." "Having you take my food is totally not super," Frankie also shouted in protest. Everyone who Luffy stole from was also arguing with Luffy, who was laughing as usual, totally oblivious to everything except food. All of a sudden a piece of meat went flying from Luffy's mouth and into Nami, dirtying the new outfit she bought and was wearing and got a big discount on. "What the hell, Luffy?" Nami shouted in a huge angry voice. Instantly the crew knew to watch themselves, as despite Luffy being on the receiving end of the feisty navigator's wrath, it wasn't wise to bring attention onto themselves, for she might just turn her wrath onto them. Even Sanji made sure to be quiet. Robin as usual had her usual gracious smile ever present as usual. "Luffy, you are so dead," said Nami in a deadly voice. Luffy gulped in response. He did not fear anything, not the admirals, not the world government, nothing with the exception of Nami. So dead. "Even being a rubber man wouldn't help you one bit," continued Nami in the same deadly voice. Luffy began to sweat buckets of sweat when Nami continued. "I mean, this was expensive clothes. Do you know how hard I had to fight in order to get this discount?" said Nami. Sanji was silent at first, but upon hearing that Nami had her dress which she had to fight so hard for ruined, instantly put him in his beat the shit up of anyone who makes Nami Swan mad mode. "Luffy, how could you do that to my beautiful Nami Swan? After she worked so hard to get that discount. I'll kill you, shitty rubber man," said Sanji while comically choking Luffy. "But Nami, Sanji was the one who kicked me and made the meat fly out," answered Luffy. "Don't you dare blame Sanji-kun for this. Sanji-kun would never do anything to hurt me. He loves women," countered Nami. "Of course I would never do anything to beautiful Nami Swan, you shitty Gomu. So don't blame me for your fault," Sanji said, siding with Nami, and because in his mind he believed it to be true. The two continued to beat up on Luffy. "Geez, you always do this. You eat all the food. You drag us on dangerous journeys all for adventure, you damage the ship, make loud noise, and worst of all, you make me use up my money," shouted Nami in an angry tone. "I wonder why the hell I decided to follow such an irresponsible captain," Nami said in an irritated voice. "And you eat all the special food I make for my beloved Nami Swan and Robin Swan. How could you do that to my beautiful ladies? And you make all sorts of noise distracting my Nami Swan from her map making and Robin Swan from her reading," Sanji said, adding his part into it. "It's no trouble at all, Cooksan," answered Robin. "Don't say that, Robin-chan. You don't need to hide your frustrations of this crappy captain. I shall punish him for interrupting your reading," said Sanji in his knight in shining armor mood. The two continued to beat up and pulverize Luffy while continuing their ranting. Meanwhile Luffy didn't know why, but their accusations were really getting to him. Normally this would never bother him because he knew they didn't mean it and did it all the time, but this time was different. He didn't know why it was different, but it was very different from other times. And that made all those insults begin to get to him. "Is that so?" said Luffy with a serious voice. Zoro and Robin instantly picked up on the change in Luffy's tone and mood and wondered what got into him. Well, whatever it was, it clearly wasn't good at all. Nami and Sanji were stuck in their anger tantrums and the rest of the crew didn't pick up on anything since what is happening is a typical occurrence. "Yes," both Sanji and Nami said together. "Then maybe I should leave the crew," Luffy finally said with his hat over his eyes. The crew grew deathly silent. All traces of chaos, fun and life left immediately. Those words did not come out of Luffy's mouth. Those words would never come out of any member of the crew's mouth, much less Luffy's. He's the one who fought the hardest to keep the crew together. When Nami stole the ship, he followed and believed she did not betray the crew. When Robin was taken by the world government, he followed, going as far as declaring war on the world for her. When Usopp left, Luffy welcomed him back with open arms after a true apology. There was no way that the one who did those things would now be the one to leave. And for something so trivial. "Luffy, what did you just say?" said Nami in a shocked voice. "You heard me. If I'm such a bad captain who brings so much problems, then maybe I should leave. That would solve all of our problems, wouldn't it?" said Luffy in a dark voice. Sanji too was equally shocked. Since when did a little argument go so out of control that one of their own would leave? And that person would be the captain. While he loved his beautiful ladies and didn't care so much for the rest of the idiots, they were still Nakama, and to have one of them leave, even suggested, was unthinkable. "Boy, listen here, you shithead, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you better stop saying such stupid things," said Sanji in a serious voice. "Hey Luffy, nothing good would come out of being so hostile, and nothing good would especially come from leaving the crew," said Zoro, trying to calm the situation down, sensing early on how Luffy was not reacting the way he usually does. "Luffy, please don't go," cried a panicking Chopper. "Luffy," said Usopp. Straw Hat, said Frankie, removing his shades. Luffy-san, said Brook. Robin, however, remained silent. However, she along with Nami were the ones most shocked at the words that Luffy said. Both of them suffered great misery during their lives, and Luffy was their shining beacon, their savior who freed them both from their pasts and gave back their family and their dream. It is for this reason, along with his love for his Nakama, his strong sense of right and wrong, his willingness to help even strangers, and many other reasons, that both of them have strong feelings for him beyond that of the other Nakama. Robin maintained her composure, but inwardly she was afraid of what Luffy might do. Nami, however, didn't really get what Luffy was doing, and despite her hidden feelings for him, still was angry at him. First for the clothes, and now her anger took on a new level. You say I cause a lot of problems. Well, if I'm gone there wouldn't be any problems. You say I make you spend a lot of money on meat. But if I'm gone you wouldn't have to spend any more of your precious money on meat. If I'm gone, then you wouldn't have to go on any more dangerous adventures. If I'm gone you get the peace and quiet you want so much. If I'm gone, all the things wrong here would be fixed if I leave. Luffy finished explaining his reasoning. Nami could not believe what she just heard. It was unusual for Luffy to give any sort of logical explanation and argument. Normally she would be impressed for Luffy to have done such a thing if he hadn't done it for the wrong reasons. No matter what reasons there were, no matter how logical the argument is, no Nakama should ever leave. And she didn't want to lose any of her precious Nakama, especially her captain. Luffy then turned to Sanji, and Sanji made sure to pay close attention to what he was about to say, for what he would say would define the future of the crew. And you, Sanji, said Luffy. I am the cause of your beautiful Nami Swan and Robin Swan not getting any of their special food full of your love. Well, if I'm gone, then you could give it all to them. And if I'm gone, Nami can draw her maps, while Robin can read her books in peace and quiet, just like they wanted. Luffy explains his reasoning to Sanji. Sanji, just like Nami, was shocked and impressed by the argument. He would have complimented the boy captain had it not been for the worst cause. Luffy, what's wrong with you? How could you even suggest that? Nami desperately asked. You're always complaining about me being a bad captain. Well, you would have nothing to complain about should I be gone, Luffy said in the same serious voice. And so far you have yet to give me a reason as to why I should stay. So why should I stay when I cause so much problems and I'm such a bad captain? Asked Luffy seriously. Because we're Nakama. What other reason do you need other than that? And you're not a bad captain, Luffy. Yes, you're loud, make a lot of noise, drag us on dangerous adventures, make me spend a lot of money on meat, but you're definitely not a bad captain. Nami answered, desperately hoping to calm Luffy down and make him reconsider. Chopper, go give this idiot a checkup. He's giving reasoning that's stupid even for him, and he's talking crazy. Sanji asked the doctor. Unfortunately for the cook, the little reindeer doctor was crying at the thought of Luffy leaving. Zoro remained impassive, but he too was hurting inside. I can't believe this is happening, said Usopp in a sad voice. Me too, bro, replied Frankie also in a sad voice. I can't believe what I'm seeing, said Brook also in a sad voice and with no skull joke attached. Robin continued to watch silently as not only was her family started falling apart, but the boy she loved was the cause of it. She would hate and kill anyone who tries to split her Nakama up, but she can't do that to Luffy. You have yet to give me a good enough reason to stay, and being Nakama this time isn't good enough, said Luffy. Silence. There was only silence as the weight of what Luffy said sank in. Nakama, something that meant the world to him, now isn't good enough. Well, if you're not going to give me a reason to stay, here, Nami placing his prized straw hat on her head. Nami took some time to adjust to better to see Luffy. That hat is a symbol of a promise I made to Shanks that I would one day give it back to him as Pirate King. But in order to be Pirate King, I must have a strong crew. And since I no longer have that, I can never be Pirate King. That dream is dead. Luffy, Nami said in a hurt voice as tears were beginning to form. Get yourself a new captain. A better one than me. One who isn't an idiot or makes you spend money or makes noise or leads you on dangerous adventures, Luffy continued. Luffy, Nami said, but she could say what she wanted to say. Luffy then turned to his crew. This is it, everyone. Sorry for all the trouble I've caused you, but you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore, said Luffy as he looked at his crew for perhaps the final time. See you all, the last words that came out of his mouth as Luffy left the ship and his crew forever. The crew all followed him in hopes to stop him of making the decision that would ruin the crew forever. Luffy, get back here. Turn around, shouted Nami. Boy, get back here, Luffy, shouted Usopp. Please come back, Luffy cried and shouted Chopper. Straw Hat, don't do this, shouted Frankie, this time not making any use of the word super. Luffy-san, Brook also cried. Only Zoro and Robin maintained their composures, but closer inspection you could see Zoro's hand twitching and see moisture forming in Robin's eyes. However, both did a good job in hiding it. Despite all this happening, Luffy never turned around. The crew could only watch silently as their beloved captain, savior and friend disappeared before their very eyes. All the Straw Hats thought one thing. It has only been a little while since Luffy left the Straw Hat crew. The crew were all thinking different thoughts about this. But regardless of what they all thought, they still could not believe this was happening. They wished it was all a dream and they would wake up to hear Luffy's annoying yells for meat and adventure. Wake up to hear Sanji kick the crap out of him for disturbing his and his beautiful ladies. Wake up to just being normal. But life was cruel, and even more so a pirate's life. Luffy, one of their own, and their captain had left them. The crew was still feeling the after effects of Luffy's decision. Luffy cried, a sniveling Chopper. Usopp came down to hug the crying reindeer, for once not in a hug of fright but one of comfort. He too was struggling to hold his tears in. Franky and Brook silently watched as the crew fell apart in grief and sorrow over Nakama. They both could understand why, as they both held Luffy in high regards and his leaving affected them just as much. Zoro was silent during the whole affair. Despite his calm appearance, he too was shocked at the outcome. He had seen Luffy go to great lengths for his crew, and for him to just leave over a petty argument, he wasn't sure if he would ever trust him ever again. Robin was silent as she tried to be strong. While harboring feelings for her captain, she knew she had to be strong for the crew, because now the crew needed its strength more than ever, since now they lost their strongest person. Next to Robin, Nami took Luffy's leaving just as hard as Robin, even harder. She had feelings for the idiot captain, though she would never admit it, even to herself. But one thing she would not argue with was that she did not want him to go. But he did, and now she began to think that it was her fault her captain left. If she hadn't started that stupid argument, none of this would have happened. Sanji had already bitten down on his cigarette. That shitty captain, how dare he leave this crew? He had a responsibility, and now he is wrecking the crew apart and making his beloved ladies cry. He knew Luffy was selfish, but this was a new low for him. A low he could never forgive. Well, we should wait for the log to set, said Zoro neutrally. The crew all turned to Zoro, miffed at the fact he doesn't seem the least bit concerned about Luffy leaving. Zoro, damn you, how could you say that, shouted an angry Chopper. Yeah, you're even colder than those swords you carry, Franky also shouted angrily. Zoro, what the hell is wrong with you, can't you see Luffy left? An irate Nami said. The effects of her hero's leaving was more present in her than anyone else. Morimo, you better have some good explaining to do before I kick your ass. The crew is falling apart and you just stand there talking like it's nothing, said Sanji angrily, who too was feeling like it was his fault Luffy left. Normally he would always admit that siding with the ladies was the right thing, but now he wasn't sure, not when siding with the beautiful ladies meant breaking the crew apart. Shut up all of you, said Zoro in a commanding voice. The crew all instantly got out of their somber and angry mood. Somber for Luffy leaving and anger at Zoro. We have argued over plenty of things in the past. Over which course to take, how much money we have, who gets what food, many things indeed. But one thing all of us have stayed true to was the fact that the crew should all stay together and help each other no matter what, said Zoro in an authoritative voice. The crew all recognized the seriousness of which Zoro was speaking in. He was using the same tone of voice he used when they were discussing Usopp's return. They knew he was serious and they had to listen. That was the foundation of the crew. It was something our captain himself founded and was the embodiment of continued Zoro. He may have been an idiot, but as the captain and founder of this crew, he had to strive to be a role model for all his crew members. He had to do anything for his crew and do anything to make sure they all stayed together. Now he, the one who started all this, has turned his back on the very foundations he created when he started this crew. He has not only betrayed us, he has betrayed himself, turning his back on the very things he stood for by leaving the crew he founded. That cannot be forgiven so easily, said Zoro with a serious look in his eyes. The crew all looked shaken but understood the importance of what he was saying. No matter what happened, Luffy should have never left the crew. There is something else, Zoro said and then paused for greater effect. The group all listened attentively. Luffy is normally an idiot. But when he does say things that make sense, they may not necessarily be right, but they are things he truly believes in. Like when he told Vivi that it wasn't right to not expect anyone to die. Someone else might argue otherwise, but you cannot deny the logic behind it makes sense, even if you don't believe it yourself. Likewise with Mariah, beating him may not have necessarily returned our shadows, but Luffy truly believed it would. Likewise, Luffy explained why he believed he is the cause of all the problems of the crew. He truly believes that he was right, even if he may not have been, explained Zoro. The crew all knew what Zoro was saying was true. When Luffy did make sense, he was usually right, but even if he wasn't, he still believed he was right until proven otherwise, which has yet to happen. I would not allow Luffy to return to this crew unless he offers a sincere apology. When Usopp left, it was the same thing, so it would be no different now. No, it would be different. Usopp may have been Nakama, but he wasn't the captain. Also when he left because he wanted to keep Mariar Nakama. Also there was his own insecurities. Those reasons, while not enough to leave, were at least understandable. Luffy on the other hand left for reasons which were petty. He left over arguments that in the past never bothered him. An apology is needed from him, or else there is no place for him, continued Zoro. The captain who is willing to abandon the crew so easily will only make the crew fall apart, Zoro further declared. The crew all looked down knowing he was right. Luffy is my captain too. I too was affected, said Zoro in a much more vulnerable voice, and in that moment, two memories came back to both him. Zoro remembered losing badly to Mihawk and then crying to Luffy that he would never lose again. Him, the monster, the demon, was crying. Also he remembered giving his life for Luffy when Kuma came to capture him. For the same man Zoro cried and nearly died for, to just betray him like this, he too was hurt. Sanji likewise at the same time remembered those two memories and knew that the swordsman would be affected just like everyone else. With the exception of Nami and Robin, he may have taken this the worse, perhaps even more than himself. It's interesting that despite all their bickering and fighting, their minds were connected by those same two memories. However, Zoro was the first mate and he needed to step up to keep the crew together. If Luffy truly believes he was right, then even if he does come back, he may not apologize. If that's the case, it would be best to leave him on this island, Zoro said. But Zoro, pleaded Nami. No buts, retaliated Zoro. Nami looked like she wanted to argue but kept silent. Nami-san, let it go, said Sanji in a consoling voice. Me and the Mosshead may not agree on many things, but what he is saying is right, finished Sanji. The log sets in a few days. If Luffy was indeed angry, then a few days should be enough for him to blow off his steam. When he comes back he should be in a calmer state of mind and apologize. We have a few days, so we'll wait, finished Zoro. The crew all agreed and decided to wait. The mood was somber, having lost their shining beacon, and things were more mechanic, done as if simply to keep a sense of normalcy, not out of sheer joy or fun. They waited for a few days, and on the last day their tensions were at an all-time high. It was the last day and they waited for Luffy to return. This would be the last chance they would get for the boy captain to rejoin, but Luffy never came. The crew reluctantly left to continue sailing the further seas without their captain this time. A month later. In a vast fortress, a young man wearing a green cloak and typical revolutionary attire was walking into a large throne room. Inside that room 10 figures all in green cloaks, all in typical revolutionary attire, were present. And in front of them, sitting on the throne, was a large man also wearing a green cloak with dark clothes. Monkey D. Dragon, Monkey D. Luffy and 10 members of the Knights of D were together. This is one of, if not my favorite chapter, so please review and let me know what you think. I'm more inclined to write. Welcome to the Knights of D, my son, said Dragon in a proud voice. Thank you, father, I am happy to be here and I would serve you till death, replied Luffy. Well said, my son, said Dragon in his proud voice. But still, it's hard to believe that this scrawny kid is actually one of us, never mind that he is Lord Dragon's son, said Hannibal. Do not underestimate him, he is Lord Dragon's son after all. He carries the blood of the strongest through his veins, Electra said. Even before he awakened the will of D, he has performed some incredible feats like taking down a warlord Crocodile, quickly Juri said. Crocodile was a weakling, trash like him isn't worthy of joining the revolutionary army and fighting for our great cause. Defeating him is a simple affair. Anyone who can use Haki can do it. Hannibal countered. But he invaded all 3 of the world government strongholds and even declared war on the world government to save Nico Robin, the light of the revolution, said Monroe. She was only given that name to gain her trust. Her sole purpose for being the light of the revolution was to make it easy to form an alliance with Luffy, since he was so determined to become Pirate King and stay with his crew. Making him join the army would have been impossible. Replied Sabo. The O'Hara incident and her ability to read the poneglyphs was simply used to make it all the more convincing for her to join. Anyone who has awakened the will of D can read the poneglyphs, since it is the language of our ancestors, so naturally we can all read it. Lord Dragon, who is the strongest D alive along with Pirate King Gold D. Roger, can read it best. And Luffy, who recently awakened it, could also read it. Nico Robin was not needed for that reason. Simply to make it easier, get Luffy on his side, Sabo continued. But since Luffy came to us willingly, asking her to join was completely unnecessary. Of course we would have rescued her anyway, since we are revolutionaries and she was a slave and Tequila Wolf to build a bridge for the world nobles, Electra finished. I still find it hard to believe Robin was with you, father, said Luffy, genuinely surprised. That was quite something. In fact, she would have made a fine addition to the army given her background. She obviously cannot join the Knights of D, but she would fit perfectly into the army masses. But she was hard to locate, so we couldn't find her. We would have taken her in had we known, said Dragon. I'm glad to know that there are people out there that would have helped her. I wished she met you guys sooner. She suffered a lot, said Luffy. The revolutionary army is about freedom. And she was denied it for a long time. The same thing with your navigator cat burglar Nami. Had we known what was going on in East Blue we would have went and helped. It would also increase our influence into the East Blue, for despite it being the weakest sea of all, it produces some of the greatest people in the world. Yourself, myself, your crew members and Gold Roger are prime examples. It would be a strategic move to rescue it had we known, answered Dragon. But I don't like the idea of you guys talking about using Robin for anything. Even if you rescued her and wanted to get to me, said Luffy in a serious tone. Well, I still find it hard to believe he's one of us, said Hannibal. Again, he is a D and Lord Dragon's son. Besides, after he awakened the will of D to help him harness it, it was required he fight each of us and his father. You cannot deny how quickly he mastered it and how strong he is, Kanka, answered Hannibal. I see. You certainly have a good point. Despite not winning all the battles, he certainly gave a truly magnificent fight worthy of his name, Hannibal said, having to agree with what Kanka said. The feats that he has achieved in the past as a pirate, the fact that he is a D and dragons on to boot, his great strength of charisma, he certainly is worthy to be one of us, Jupiter said. He may have all that, but there is one more, countered Sanby. What, asked Jupiter. Commitment to Lord Dragon's cause. It is one of the most important aspects of the Revolutionary Army, and especially for a Knight of D. You have to be completely devoted to him, and Luffy-kun tends to be a bit rash and acts of his own, judging by his past, Sanby said wisely. We all have that issue. But in the end we still are Lord Dragon's greatest followers, Jupiter countered. Everyone listen, shouted Luffy. I may have only been a revolutionary for a short time, but I am completely devoted to him. He took me in when I left the crew. And unlike the crew, he forgives me for my faults. Despite all that, he trained me and taught me to harness the power of D. And I hate the world government. They killed Ace, they killed my mother, tried to kill my crew, made Hancock suffer as a slave, made Bonchan suffer in Impel Down, did nothing to help the fishmen and mermen of Fishman Island get along with humans. I hate them and would do anything to see them burn in hell, said Luffy in a passionate voice. Luffy Sanby couldn't help but say. Of course you're a fishman too. So naturally that part would affect you, Scorpia said. Luffy would not betray us. He may act on his own, but he is completely loyal to us. His speech and his past along with his resolve proves it, said Dragon as a matter of fact. Shooting his hand up in the air, he shouted. Monkey D. Luffy. Knight of D, shouted Dragon with his hand in the air. All the remaining Knights of D followed suit and shot their hands up in the air. This was concluded with Luffy shooting his hand up. The Knights of D, led by Monkey D. Dragon, the greatest of Revolutionary Army and the group that would bring the world government to their knees. A few hours later, Dragon was walking in the corridors when a large individual stood in front of him. Quite the character, isn't he, said the stranger. Indeed he is, Teach, said Dragon. Blackbeard of the Four Emperors wasn't dressed in his usual pirate clothes, but instead in Knight of D attire. Marshal D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard, is the final member of the Knights of D. Zahahaha, I met him in Mocktown, and it was easy to tell he was something. And when I saw his wanted poster, it made sense, he was your son after all, said Blackbeard. Well, it was a good thing you didn't capture him at Mocktown, or else things would have gotten complicated. I'm glad I got to you to stop you from pursuing him any further, said Dragon matter of fact. Well, even if he was your son, he was not with the army, so I didn't think you would mind, said Blackbeard. There is no cause to be upset. It is understandable. In the end, no harm came to him, besides you have done well in helping in my master plan to bring about the end of the world government and those who oppose me, said Dragon. It is something. I mean, first you approach me and ask me to join your army in exchange for training me in awakening the will of D. Then you give me the darkness fruit. So what I had to do was somehow hand over Ace to the world government, which would prompt them to go to war with Whitebeard. The resulting battle would significantly weaken the world government regardless of whether they won or not. That would make it easier for the Revolutionary Army to crush them in the future. Explained Blackbeard on Dragon's plan. You would have me kill both Ace and Whitebeard should either survive the war. Of course Ace didn't survive, so that wasn't necessary, but Whitebeard sure did. Ace is the son of my mortal enemy, the man I admire and hate the most, Gold D. Roger. Since Ace is that man's son, he would never join me. In fact, just like his father, he would soon oppose me. And I'm positive he would awaken the will of D with time. He needed to be taken out. And Whitebeard had to be taken out for you to be an emperor. Dragon continued where Blackbeard left off. And then as an emperor I would seize all of Whitebeard's territory and make it our territory. It would make it easier for the Knights of D to move. Of course the rest of the army, even the commanders, cannot take advantage of this, since they all think they are my territory when in reality, they are yours. I got Whitebeard's devil fruit as an added bonus. It helped because it made the world think I killed him for his devil fruit, not to expand the influence of the Revolutionary Army. Said Blackbeard. But it was really tough. I mean, I had to fool everyone into thinking that I wanted to be Pirate King. Not to mention they all think I killed Thatch to get his devil fruit, when in reality I already ate the devil fruit I wanted. I decided to give the fruit to one of my Nakama. And I had to tell Ace that I was pursuing his little brother for the warlord title. It wasn't necessary, but it certainly made sure Ace would fight, continued Blackbeard. Though being a warlord was a nice bonus. It made getting into Impel Down and recruiting new crew members a lot easier. As well as sneaking into Marineford. Things just seemed to be going my way completely, exactly as I wanted. Finched Blackbeard. Everything seems to work in our favor, even the unexpected, said Dragon. Now that my son is here, I have everything I need to conquer the world government and make the D the rulers of the world the way it should be. Said Dragon. The world government has only 2 Admiral class fighters, Fleet Admiral Akainu and Kizaru, along with the 7 warlords. That means 9 enemies in total. We on the other hand have 12 fighters, each capable of battling Admiral or Emperor class enemies. If somehow the world government formed an alliance with the 3 remaining Empereros, no matter, they would have 12 fighters against our 13, we still have the advantage. But we would still possess the greater power. Then there is myself. My power is on par with, no greater than Roger's. We may have been equally powerful back then, but that was 20 years ago. I am much stronger than back then. I alone can kill them all. Finally there is our trump card, the ancient weapon Uranus. The colossal super sea king that obeys only me. Said Dragon. No matter how you look at it, we win. We would trample the world government and anyone who gets in our way, continued Dragon. Nothing would stop us, finished Dragon. Quite a lot revealed, huh? I really enjoyed this particular chapter. My favorite actually. Anyway, some notes. The Knight of D attire consists of the typical revolutionary's clothes with green cloaks similar to dragons. Also a note on devil fruits. I believe they don't affect clothes. Remember when Luffy turns small when he goes gear 3rd, his clothes shrinks to match. If stretch, his clothes would stretch to match. If his own Knight of D transforms, the clothes wouldn't be destroyed. All the new guys are Knights of D, so they all are Ds. About Robin. Dragon only called her the light of the revolution to make her feel as if she was important to them when she wasn't. It made it easier to trust Dragon. The true goal was so that when Dragon would ever approach Luffy for an alliance, Robin would spread a good word and influence Luffy to do so. Dragon knew Luffy was too committed to his crew and becoming Pirate King to join the army, but an alliance should be fine. However, since Luffy joined on his own, asking Robin to come was a complete waste of time. About Dragon's plan. Well, it was a long-term plan similar to Aizen and Toby. Basically, Dragon found Teach, who was already part of Whitebeard's crew, and offered to train him and give him the dark fruit in exchange for becoming a Yonko and helping the army. The fruit Thatch got was in this thick and unknown one. He just said it was the dark fruit to fool everyone. He already ate the fruit. He only killed him so that Ace would pursue him, knowing Ace's code. The fruit was given to a random member of the Blackbeard Pirates. When Luffy and Teach met in Mock Town, Teach was truly after Luffy. Since Luffy wasn't part of the army, he didn't think Dragon would mind. However, after Luffy escaped from him to Skypia, Dragon intercepted him and ordered him not to go after Luffy. During his battle with Ace, he only said he was going after Luffy to make sure Ace stays on his tail. Dragon wanted Ace gone because Ace is Roger's son. Roger and Dragon have history which would be revealed in due time. Since Ace is Roger's son, Ace would never join him, in fact he would oppose him, so Dragon wanted to get rid of him at once. He could have done it easily, but Ace was under Whitebeard's protection. And despite Dragon being much stronger than Whitebeard, he still does not want to challenge Whitebeard directly. Handing Ace to the world government achieves 3 things. First, it makes it easier to kill Ace with the whole war going on. Both Dragon and Teach know that Whitebeard would go to war with the world government to save his sons. Secondly, the war with the Whitebeard pirates would weaken the world government and the Whitebeard pirates to the point where Teach could kill Whitebeard himself and Ace should he escape, as well as allow Teach to steal Whitebeard's powers. It wasn't exactly guaranteed that Teach would become an emperor, but he has 2 devil fruits, knows Whitebeard's territory and killed an emperor, so Dragon was confident he would become one. Finally, it would significantly weaken the world government so the revolutionary army could take over in due time. It made the seas more chaotic, thus forcing the world government to spend more resources on it on a long term. Finally, Luffy does not know about Blackbeard being a revolutionary. Dragon kept that secret, which is why he was absent when the rest of the Knights of D were present. The next chapter is here. It reveals quite a lot. Review and tell me what you think. And please read the notes at the end because it clarifies things that might be confusing. The time is near, said Dragon. Time for what, father, asked Luffy. Time for what? Isn't obvious. Time to invade Mariejois, replied Dragon. Already, father, asked a perplexed Luffy. Why, yes, Luffy, confirmed Dragon. Truth be told, I wasn't expecting to have the invasion of Mariejois this soon. In fact, the invasion wasn't supposed to take place for several more years, but you joining certainly speed things up, explained Dragon. I am very selective when it comes to choosing members to be part of the Knights of D, each must have great power, be it D, have all 3 types of Haki, and have awakened the power of D, each of these requires luck as you should know. Continued Dragon. It's really tough finding people who meet each of these. And even if they do, they need to have the most important thing. And I believe you know what that is. Said Dragon. Be loyal to you, your army and your cause, answered Luffy, immediately knowing that this was the most important aspect. Not just for the Knights of D, but for all members of the Revolutionary Army. I wasn't expecting to find another candidate to become a member of the Knights of D so soon. And I certainly wasn't expecting it to be you of all people on this world. I was at Louge Town to see if there was a possibility, but I could immediately tell that would never happen. Said Dragon. So to think that you would join my army of your own free will. Even now it still surprises me. And you already met quite a few of the requirements to be a member of the Knights of D. And I fully believed that you would be able to awaken the power of D, since you are my son. And despite being here for only a short time, your loyalty was certainly with me. Continued Dragon. But even if you were the perfect candidate to become a knight, I still did not expect you to become a member so quickly. It takes years to master the power of D. You achieved it in just a few weeks. That is the fastest of any D in history, including myself and Roger. Not only that, I thought it would take years for you to become loyal enough to the army for the rank. Yet it took a few weeks. Truly, I did not expect things to go so well. Finished Dragon. Thank you, father. But it was thanks to your training as well as the battles with the other knights that I was able to become this strong. Sure, I was brought to the brink of death several times, but in the end, it was worth it. I am now strong enough to serve you and help you crush the world government, answered Luffy. Well said, Luffy. Spoken like a true knight of D, replied Dragon to Luffy's speech. Anyway, your joining occurred at the perfect time. You see, this year is the World Government's Council of the Kings. Also known as Reverie. Said Dragon. Reverie, what's that? I think I heard about it a few times back on Fishman Island, but I can't remember what it is about. Asked Luffy. It's sort of a gathering of major figures of the world government. It takes place every 4 years. Important people from all over the world would be gathering there. Kings, princes, princesses, politicians and other high-ranking people from different islands, cities and kingdoms would be present to discuss world affairs. We are going to invade during this year's reverie, explained Sabo, just entering and joining the conversation. Welcome, Sabo, glad you could make it. Said Dragon to the most powerful member of the Knights of D. Greetings, Lord Dragon. Luffy-sama greeted Sabo politely in his usual monotone aloof voice. You too, Sabo greeted Luffy back. Well, as I was saying, many high-ranking officials would be there. The Gorosei and the Tenryubito should be there as well. Further explained Sabo. Those heartless bastards. The ones who ordered the destruction of Robin's homeland and made her life hell. And those stuck-up bastard Tenryubito. If they are going to be there, I want to be there as well to kill them all. Said Luffy in an angered voice with haki beginning to leak out. Of course, both Dragon and Sabo were not even fazed by Luffy's haki, as both are powerful, experienced warriors of D, so neither were intimidated the slightest. Furthermore, with so many high officials present, it's only natural that they would have high protection. Because of that, many vice admirals would be there as well. Also, Admiral Kizaru, Fleet Admiral Akainu and World Government Commander-in-Chief Kong would be there as well. Explained Sabo. Akainu, that bastard who killed Ace. He is the one I want to kill the most. Hey Dad, Sabo, during the invasion, I want to be the one to kill Akainu. Said Luffy in a deeply angry and hateful voice, while clutching his chest from feeling his scare throb at the mention of Akainu's name and the prospect of killing him. At the same time, hateful haki was coming from him. We can't make any promises. Akainu is the fleet admiral for a reason. He earned that position by battling an admiral-class enemy for 10 days straight. And since Aokiji was an admiral at the time, he had great mastery over haki, which made it even harder for Akainu to defeat. Whoever faces Akainu during the invasion will have to go all out and fight with the intention of killing him, explained Sabo. The Shichibukai are also given invitations to come and serve as bodyguards, but it is optional, and usually all of them except Kuma ignore it, said Sabo. Kuma, thought Luffy. What is it? Asked Dragon. Well, Kuma did save us back at Sabaody Archipelago. So I wanted to thank him for saving me and my crew. Said Luffy in a soft voice. Dragon and Sabo both had their eyes shadowed. I see. Well, that makes sense. But it wouldn't make that much of a difference. Kuma is a full pacifista, a complete human weapon. He no longer has any free will of his own. You would have trouble thanking him because of that, said Dragon in a soft voice. But I still wanted to thank him. Said Luffy. Both Dragon and Sabo were silent for a moment. Very well. But only if you see him first. It is all-out war, so the knights would not be holding back, said Dragon with a regretful tone. Luffy himself had his eyes downcast. However, said Dragon suddenly. At this, Luffy quickly perked up. I would have the knights try to avoid Kuma to give you the opportunity. Sabo, can you handle that? Asked Dragon to the leader of the Knights of D. It shall be done, Lord Dragon, answered Sabo in a respectful tone. One more thing, father, asked Luffy. Luffy then paused for the next question because it was one he needed to know. Will Alabasta and Ryuga Kingdom be there? Luffy asked the question. Both Sabo and Dragon narrowed their eyes and had serious looks on each of their faces. It was known that Luffy defeated Crocodile and saved Alabasta Kingdom and became good friends with Princess Vivi in the process. Also, it was known that Luffy defeated Hody Jones, saving Ryuga Kingdom, and also became good friends with Princess Shirahashi, the current reincarnation of the ancient weapon Poseidon. Simply asking about those two showed that Luffy still held deep loyalty to his Nakama despite swearing allegiance to the Revolutionary Army. Of course, it was a curious question and they needed Luffy, so they decided to answer. Yes, both Alabasta Kingdom and Ryuga Kingdom received invitations to attend this year's reverie. So it is likely that King Nefertari Cobra and Princess Vivi, both of Alabasta, along with King Neptune and Princess Shirahashi of Ryuga Kingdom, would be present. Answered Sabo with his eyes narrowed and keeping a sharp eye on Luffy. Vivi, Shirahashi, thought Luffy, who began to reminisce on the memories he had with the two. I see, said Luffy finally after a few moments. Also, Luffy, one more thing. We still have time before the invasion of Mariagewa, so I have a special mission for you. Said Dragon. What is it? Asked Luffy. I want you to kill Big Mom. Dragon stated. Big Mom, you mean the Emperor of the Sea? That is correct. I believe that after you saved Fishman Island that you would have some issues with her. So I figured it would be best to send you, Dragon said. Luffy then remembered the events of Fishman Island and how Big Mom was willing to destroy it because of some candy. She was willing to kill Shirahashi, Hachi, Kami, Papig, Neptune, the Neptune princes and all the people because of some candy. He then remembered how he declared war on her and how he'll beat her in the New World and make Fishman Island his territory. Of course, the way he is now, he obviously can't make Fishman Island his territory, but he can still protect the people of Fishman Island by killing Big Mom. I'll do it, father, said Luffy with steel and finality in his voice. Very well, you are expected to leave immediately. Said Dragon. Of course, you are needed for the invasion of Mariagewa, so you'll need to finish Big Mom, be back here and completely healed for the invasion. So you have a fairly narrow time frame to work with. Can you handle it? Asked Dragon. Yes, answered Luffy with an affirmative nod of his head. We still have quite a bit of time before Reverie actually takes place. During that time, a few loose ends are needed to be tied up. One of which is the execution of Big Mom. Said Dragon. Like what? Asked Luffy. Just some loose ends, nothing for you to worry about. Replied Dragon. Well, for now, you focus on your mission. Go, ordered Dragon. Okay, said Luffy as he left. When Luffy was gone, Sabo and Dragon continued to converse. Despite being very loyal to the army, he still clearly is attached to his Nakama. Said Sabo, voicing his concerns. Well, that is true. But in the end, his loyalty to us exceeds his loyalty to his Nakama. Rebuked a confident Dragon. Still, he clearly cares for them. That might be a problem, said Sabo. That's true. But I don't think it would become that big of a problem unless we actually harm them. As long as we are not responsible for them getting hurt, he should remain loyal to us. Said Dragon. And if it comes down to one of us harming his Nakama? Asked Sabo, voicing the million-dollar question. Dragon was silent for a moment. I suppose we would have to do what needs to be done. We are so close to conquering the world government. We cannot have anything stopping us right now. Said Dragon. However, if we do harm them, we must make sure at all costs that Luffy does not find out about it, said Dragon. Of course, we'll try as much as possible not to harm, finished Dragon. Very well, my lord, said Sabo in a respectful tone of voice. Anyway, it's time for the cleansing to begin. Said Dragon. I see, said Sabo. There are clearly a few revolutionaries in the army who would not approve of an assault on Mariagewa and would try to stop us. They would have to be killed. Said Dragon. Ivankov is one of them. That freak would be more interested in protecting the subordinates than achieving our objective. He too would have to be disposed of. Said Dragon. What about Luffy? Asked Sabo. During his break into Impel Down, Ivankov was a major ally of his. If he dies, Luffy would surely not react well, said Sabo. We'll make sure he doesn't find out. Tell him that the world government found out where he was and sent a force to kill him. His Nakama friends were also killed trying to protect him. Notify Monroe of the Knights of D. Have him kill Ivankov and the rest of those idiots on that Nakama country. Said Dragon. As you wish, my lord. Said Sabo in his usual respectful voice when speaking with Dragon. Also, Red Hair Shanks and Kaido would have to be disposed of. Both are threats to us ruling the world. Even if we destroy the world government, both would still oppose us. During the War of the Best, Kaido tried to attack Whitebeard to seize power. Red Hair was able to intercept and stop him. He might try to use the destruction of the world government to seize power. He would have to be killed, said Dragon. And Shanks is even more dangerous to our cause. Shanks is one of Roger's former nakama. As a result, he knows all about the power of D. Also, he witnessed my battle with Roger, meaning he knows of my abilities. Having seen Roger fight with the power of D many times, he knows all about it, including how to counter it. Likewise, he knows of my devil fruit powers, so he'll know how to fight me. He too knows the true history and the location of Uranus. Furthermore, Shanks was Roger's student, making him my enemy as well. He is currently one of my most dangerous enemies, and he would definitely oppose me, so he would have to be taken out. Stated Dragon as a matter of fact. Shall I take him out, my lord, asked Sabo. No, I have a better idea. I'll have Teach kill him instead. There is clearly history between Shanks and Teach, and I know that right now Teach is strong enough to kill him, said Dragon. You plan to have Teach kill Shanks in order to avoid Luffy suspecting that we would be responsible for Red Hair's death, correct, said Sabo, seeing what Dragon was planning. That is correct. Luffy already has bad history with Teach over his capture of Ace. He would certainly believe that Teacher Blackbeard would do something like kill Shanks, said Dragon. And Luffy would believe that Blackbeard did it to get one step closer to becoming Pirate King or something similar, not because you ordered it, said Sabo. That is correct. Teach was chosen to kill Shanks not only because of his history with Shanks, but because Luffy would never question as to why he did it, nor would he suspect us. As a result, he would never find out, said Dragon. It certainly would be disastrous if Luffy found it, said Sabo. Indeed it would, said Dragon. Not to mention, Luffy would be able to channel his rage at Shanks' death along with the Vankovs during the invasion of Mariagewa. As for Kaido, well, you could handle him, said Dragon. Yes, my lord, said Sabo. I'll order the rest of the Knights of D to be prepared to purge the revolutionary army of its traitors or those who would not support our cause. In the meantime, you are ordered to kill Kaido of the Four Emperors, said Dragon. Very well, Lord Dragon, answered Sabo. Dragon then got off his throne with his cloak flowing. Let the cleansing begin, said Dragon. Another bombshell chapter. Well, as usual, some notes and explanations. First, on Teach killing Shanks. I know a lot of you wanted to have Luffy kill Shanks because you are interested in the meeting between Luffy and Shanks and how it would turn out. But Luffy is still loyal to his nakama and still loyal to Shanks, despite him being very loyal to Dragon. He just wouldn't be able to bring himself to kill Shanks. If Dragon ordered Luffy to kill Shanks, then Luffy might become enraged that his father ordered him to kill his friend and idol, and he would leave the army. Dragon doesn't want to take that chance. So instead, Blackbeard would do it. Luffy would easily believe that Blackbeard would kill Shanks just for power and instead want to kill him, not knowing he did it under orders of his father Dragon. Shanks is dangerous to Dragon. Since Shanks is a former crewmate of Roger, Shanks knows about the power of D. He has seen Roger use the power of D many times, so he knows a lot about it. So it is likely that he would know how to counter it. Also, he has seen Dragon fight a big battle with Roger, so he knows about Dragon's devil fruit powers. So he knows about both of Dragon's sources of power, the devil fruit and the power of D. So he'll know how to fight and ultimately kill him. Shanks also knows the true history if you recall the Straw Hat's conversation with Rayleigh at Sabati Archipelago and the location of the ancient weapon Uranus. Also, because Shanks was close to Roger, he would never support the army, in fact, like his ex-captain, he would oppose Dragon. So Dragon needs Shanks dead. He can't get Luffy to do it since Luffy holds him in high regard and doing that might make Luffy leave the army. So Blackbeard would do it instead. They have history, so he's perfect. The fight between Roger and Dragon. I did say that there was an epic battle between Dragon and Roger. I wouldn't reveal much, but I would say that it was different than Garp's battle with Roger. Roger saw Garp as a rival and friend. Dragon, on the other hand, I would tell you, is by far Roger's strongest and greatest enemy. They do look about the same age, both are extraordinarily powerful, and as seen so far in this story have almost opposite personalities. Roger is carefree like Luffy was and Dragon cold and manipulative. Roger versus Garp would be pirate versus marine. Roger versus Dragon, on the other hand, would be good versus evil. I'll reveal the nature of this colossal battle later. Reverie. Well, I did hear in the Fishman Island arc that Reverie is supposed to take place this year. So I figured it would be the perfect time to invade the Holy Land. More importantly, Vivi and Shirahashi would be there. This would set up the fateful meeting between two of Luffy's girls, Vivi and Shirahashi. Also, the fact that many big people would be there would allow the Revolutionary Army to showcase their terrifying power. Not to mention all the important people are in one location, so it is the perfect chance to kill a good chunk of their enemies. About the high security at Reverie. I just made that up. I figured for a big event like Reverie where so many important people are gathering, naturally they would have beefed up security. So I believe that quite a few Vice Admirals, Kizaru, the Fleet Admiral Akainu and Commander-in-Chief Kong along with the Gorosei, would be there all at once. So basically this would be the best opportunity to take out the world government. Kill the emperors first. The emperors are a threat to the revolutionary army, each for their own reasons. Big Mom and Kaido might use this to seize more power, and Shanks will always be an enemy to Dragon. So they have to be taken out. Also the emperor's death would make the Reverie more important since the death of 3 emperors would cause the world government to panic and bring everyone together at Reverie to try and tackle the situation. About Luffy seeming a bit softer on Ock. Well, he had to be Ock for the story to work. So sorry about that. And if the time skip was too long, it would mean Reverie has already passed and the Straw Hats would become too strong if the time skip was too long. Also I didn't want him to appear heartless or too cold. I wanted him to still care for everyone. I just don't see how he could have a harem if he is completely cold-blooded. Luffy mastering the power of D in a few weeks. Well, Luffy basically created Gear 2nd right after seeing CP9 perform Saru. And the time skip between that and invading Enies lobby was just a few hours. So in a few hours, Luffy basically invented Gear 2nd on the spot. Not to mention that Rayleigh said that 2 years would not be enough for anyone to master just one type of hockey. Luffy on the other hand in a year and a half mastered all 3. Let's face it. Luffy grows extremely fast. Dragon finding it tough to find another Knight of D. Well, the requirements are you must be extremely strong, have all 3 types of hockey, be a D, and awaken the power of D, each requires luck, so to have all 4 is just hard. Truth be told, Dragon wasn't expecting to find another knight in years. But he did not expect Luffy to join the army. The invasion taking place so soon. Well, if I had to wait for Reverie in another 4 years, all the Straw Hats would be too strong for the knights. Also, Dragon stated that it took years to master the power of D. Dragon wasn't going to invade until Luffy was ready. Luffy was ready in just a month. And it was close to Reverie, in other words, Luffy was ready at the perfect time. I know a lot of you want to see more Straw Hats. But this is a war, so I'll need to move between the Straw Hats and the Knights. Don't worry, the Straw Hats will get their time. Sanji will definitely react to the death of Ivankov and the Nakama. Usopp would react to the death of Shanks thinking his father might have died too. Also, the Straw Hats should know that Vivi and Shirahoshi would be at Reverie, so naturally they would be interested. They would be concerned that Vivi or Shirahoshi were hurt. Dragon is evil. He now orders the killing of his own men. Trust me, the story would reveal even more evil things about him. He is the main bad guy and the strongest. His devil fruit is the Storm fruit. Storm fruit. Ability to create and control storms and storm elements at will. Wind, clouds, rain, thunder, lightning, tornadoes, snow and hail, they all answer to him. It is a Paramecia type and probably the most overpowered in this story. I'll reveal more later. Luffy killing Big Mom. Well, Luffy did declare war on Big Mom. This way he is still kin to helping his crew. It will also make things more interesting during his inevitable confrontation with Shirahoshi. Deep in the New World, one of the 4 strongest pirates crews in the world, the Red Hair Pirates captained by the infamous Red Hair Shanks, who was one of the 4 Empowers of the Sea, was currently on an island deep in the New World. The crew was happily being themselves, their usually cheery selves that showed that this crew is the one that indeed was the model for the Straw Hats pirates. Both crews were very similar, both were led by a powerful captain who loved his crew and loved to party and have good times, both were tightly knit crews, and both were extremely powerful. Of course, there were 2 main differences, the first being the size. The Red Hair Pirates were obviously larger than the Straw Hats, the second being the composition, where the Straw Hats had some of the most bizarre crewmates of all pirates' crews, which included a talking reindeer, a cyborg and even a living skeleton. Nonetheless, the Red Hair Pirates were partying like there was no tomorrow. "Alright everyone, let's party till we drop," shouted a drunk over enthusiastic Shanks. "Sure thing, Cap," replied one of the crew of the Red Hair Pirates. "Geez, I swear Shanks, you would party over anything," said the first mate of the Red Hair Pirates, who despite his serious composure, couldn't help but smile at his captain's antics. "That's the captain for you," said Lucky Rowe, the fat crewmate. "The chances of this guy ever turning down a party is the day I'll retire as a sniper," said Yasopp, father of Usopp and sniper of the Red Hair Pirates. "Gee, like that'll ever happen, I'd definitely sooner say that you'll retire as a sniper than Shanks turning down a party," replied another crewmate of Shanks. "Ahahaha, no way in hell would I ever turn down a party," replied Shanks. "See, told you," said the same crewmate. Shanks continued partying, laughing and generally having a good time when all of a sudden he felt a feeling take over him. He couldn't describe this feeling, but he could definitely say that it wasn't a good one. He could pass it off as just a fleeting thing, but Shanks was no rookie. He was an experienced pirate who traveled with the greatest pirate ever, the Pirate King Gol Roger, as well as now currently one of the 4 emperors of the sea. Experience told him that this feeling was a sign. An omen that something bad was going to happen. He learned a long time ago, perhaps from his mentor Gol Roger, along with his years of experience, both with the late Pirate King, along with his own crew, that you cannot ignore these feelings. These feelings are as important to a captain as a log pose is to a navigator. It is what steers you on the right path. And right now these feelings was telling him of something really bad happening. This was followed by a physical feeling in 2 places. The first was on his lost arm where he sacrificed it to save Luffy. The second was on his scarred eye, which had 3 scars that were given to him by Blackbeard, who right now was equal in rank with Shanks. The feeling in his eye told him that whatever was going to happen, Teach was going to be related somehow. Likewise, the feeling in his left arm suggested that something was happening to Luffy, and it was big. But he couldn't understand why he would have both of these strange feelings together. However, right now he couldn't do anything about it. Beckman, Shanks' trusted first mate, noticed the change in his captain's demeanor. "Captain, are you alright?" said a concerned Beckman. Shanks immediately left his brooding upon hearing his crewmate and first mate. "Yes sure, I'm fine," said Shanks with a reassuring smile on his face. Yassop and Luck Rowe, both veterans of the Red Hair Pirates, also noticed their captain's change in behavior, but chose to do nothing and move on. Everyone decided it was best to drop the subject and continue partying as usual. Nonetheless, Shanks and his more veteran crewmates kept their guard up because they knew that Shanks felt something, which meant that they must be on their guard. However, there was no need to panic some of the newer or weaker crew members, so they decided to continue the party. This party was indeed what people would call the calm before the storm. And indeed that was the perfect description for the event, as they were greeted by a most unpleasant visitor. The newest and arguably strongest of the 4 emperors, the Blackbeard Pirates led by Marshal D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard of the 4 emperors and secretly member of the dreaded Knights of D. "How nice to see you, Red Hair. You are looking as good as ever," said Blackbeard in his usual pompous and condescending voice. "Same to you, Teach." "Indeed same to you," replied Shanks with his eyes extremely sharp and his sword in hand. Likewise, his crew also had weapons in hand and were prepared to fight. The scene was almost identical to the previous confrontation between the Red Hair and Blackbeard pirates 2 years ago at Marineford. "You're looking as good as always. Tell me, how is that eye of yours?" said Teach, poking fun at Shanks' scarred eye. "It's the same as when I first got it from you the day we fought. And I can still feel it twinging at your very sight," said a serious Shanks, "and if you look closely you could indeed see it twinge." "Zahahahaha, well, that is to be expected. After all, it is probably the only scar you ever got in battle that has yet to heal and probably never will," said Teach, continuing making references to Shanks' eye. Shanks narrowed his eyes as he could feel his eye continuing to twinge. In fact, it was twinging even more now that the War of the Best at Marineford 2 years ago. "Enough games. What are you doing here, Teach?" "No, Blackbeard," said Shanks, finally getting to business. "Zahahahaha, as hostile as ever, Red Hair. The way you are right now, Shanks, is the same as you were 2 years ago when we last met. The same look in your eyes and sword in hand. This really is déjà vu," said Blackbeard with his usual attitude. "We are both emperors of the New World. And you know that any emperor who comes into the territory of another emperor without permission is equal to a declaration of war. And I doubt I would ever give you permission to enter my lands. So again, what are your intentions for showing up here?" said Shanks with his voice raising. "No need to get all hostile there, Red Hair. After all, we have so much history. We were both formerly part of 2 of the greatest pirate crews in the world, we both are emperors, and we both had quite a date, didn't we, on that day? We are a lot alike. Where's your love?" said Blackbeard, whose confidence and arrogance had not wavered a bit upon hearing Shanks' serious voice. "We are nothing alike. You betrayed your own crew. You killed one of your own crewmates, turned another over to the world government for power, and murdered your own captain in cold blood. You are the worst scum out there. You and me, Blackbeard, are nothing alike. Now for the last time, what do you want by coming here?" stated Shanks with steel in his voice. "There you go again, trying to deny the truth. You of all people should know how tough it is to become truly the greatest in the pirate world. It is merciless to those who lack the conviction to do what is necessary to obtain power. You have to do what you must in order to become truly great," said Teach, who finally started talking about something serious. "I killed my crewmate Thatch and stole the devil fruit he found. Then I turned over Ace to the world government so that I could become a Shichibukai. Using the privileges granted to those who obtained the title of Shichibukai, I was able to get access into Impel Down to recruit new crewmates. I believe you already met them back at Marineford. Also, I was able to kill me ex-captain, Whitebeard, as well as steal his devil fruit powers. I am the first person in history to have 2 devil fruits. I have some of the world's most heinous criminals as my subordinates and conquered all of Whitebeard's territory. Thus as a result I became a member of the 4 Emperors of the Sea and that much closer to becoming Pirate King. I did what was necessary to become what I am today. You too had to do what was necessary to become the great pirate that you are. You know this to be true. Said Blackbeard, explaining his actions. Shanks listened to his explanation too, with his eyes shadowed by his hair. It was clear to everyone, even those who didn't know him personally, that he was in a seriously bad mood and took what Blackbeard said personally. So that's it, huh? That's it. All the terrible things that you've done. All the pain that you've caused. All the people, both pirate and marine alike, who lost their lives during the war 2 years ago. All that was because you thought it was necessary to achieve power and become the Pirate King, Shanks said in a low voice with his eyes still shadowed. The whole world knows what I did. But do they know the truth? Do they really know what happened or just what they read in the newspaper, said Blackbeard in a cryptic yet still arrogant tone. What do you mean, replied Shanks, who was now confused. The world knows I defeated Portgas the Ace, or should I say Gold the Ace, and handed him to the world government, becoming a Shibuya in the process. The world knows I entered Marineford and killed Whitebeard and stole his devil fruit powers, becoming the first person to have 2 devil fruits. The world knows that I became one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea. But do they know the whole truth? The truth of what really was going on with when those events transpired, continued Blackbeard. Damn it, what the hell are you trying to say here, Blackbeard, said Shanks, who was becoming more confused by the minute. Likewise his crew were equally confused. A few tense moments to add even more tension to the suspense that was currently going on. Zahahaha. Fine, I'll tell you the truth. You see, everything that I have done so far was under orders of a higher power, said Teach, finally releasing the bombshell. Silence. That was all that was present. It is incredible how the atmosphere can change so drastically with the utterance of a single phrase. The phrase higher power was enough to change the entire complexion of the whole confrontation. Not just this one, but the whole new age that they were currently in after the Golden Age, which ended with Whitebeard's death. The War of the Best was one which indeed changed the world. 3 warlords were lost, Blackbeard, Mirai and Jin, along with the death of an emperor. Indeed, it was a war which changed the world. And now Shanks and his crew just found out that the man who manipulated the entire war was working for someone else. This was too much for everyone, especially Shanks. The entire crew, especially Shanks himself, was in a state of shock after hearing this. What do you mean, Blackbeard? Are you saying that everything you did was because someone ordered you to? Shouted a still perplexed Shanks. That's right, red hair, everything I did was under orders of my leader, said Blackbeard. Everything I done was under his orders. Defeating Ace and handing him over to the world government, which would prompt Whitebeard to go to war with the world government to save his nakama. And then entering the war and killing Whitebeard. Even taking the title of emperor. Everything was because I was ordered to. Said Blackbeard. Of course, some things I did on my own. For example, killing one of Whitebeard's crewmates was done specifically to get Ace to follow me. Telling everyone I wanted to be Pirate King was also my choice to make everything easier. Likewise, getting the Shibukai title simply made things easier to carry out his orders. I honestly didn't care about it, nor even needed it to begin with. It did allow me entrance into Impel Down as well as made sneaking into Marineford easier. Also, getting Whitebeard's power was a huge bonus. Continued Blackbeard. Of course, you entering and stopping the War of the Best was suspected by my leader, who knows you somewhat, so he ordered me not to engage you. Honestly, I wouldn't have engaged you anyway if I was given a choice. However, if he did order me to fight you, I would naturally, said Blackbeard. So who is this leader you speak of? And how does he know me? Asked Shanks, the most important question. Oh, it is someone who you are very familiar with. Said Blackbeard. Then with a maniacal look on his face he finally said, Monkey D. Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army. That name was met with reactions from every one of the Red Hair Pirates. Monkey D. Dragon was the most infamous and most dangerous figure in the world, even more feared than the Pirate King. If Roger was the pinnacle of pirates, then Dragon was the pinnacle of all those who opposed the world government. Dragon is so feared that he is known worldwide as the world's most wanted man. In fact, he is more wanted than Gol Roger himself when he was alive. All the members of the Red Hair crew had gasps on their faces. But the one with the biggest reaction was none other than Shanks himself. Dragon, said Shanks with his face in a scorn. Memories of that dangerous man came back to Shanks like a movie projector. Shanks could still remember that man. How so extraordinarily powerful he was that the Roger pirates thought he was a god. How he came so close to killing his former crew, his captain, and destroying the world by attempting to awaken the ancient weapon Uranus. However, Roger was able to stop him. However, Roger wasn't the type to kill his enemies, which was why he let Dragon live. The mere mention of that man's name is enough to send a chill down his spine, which is something considering that as one of the 4 great pirates of the New World, nothing should scare him. I knew the moment I heard his name that he was the leader of the Revolutionary Army. And from reading in the newspapers that his full name was Monkey D. Dragon only confirmed that his was the same guy from 20 years ago, said Shanks with an extremely hateful look on his face. The moment I heard he was alive, I knew I would have to do something to stop him. But as leader of the Revolutionary Army, he was mostly liberating countries from the world government and freeing people from slavery. He didn't seem to be doing anything bad. I thought his defeat at the hands of Captain Roger changed him for the better, so I never bothered. It looks like I was wrong. But to think he was doing something as big as manipulating a whole war, that just seems crazy. At the same time, I'm not surprised considering it is him of all people. Something like this is something he would surely do. Not to mention it's possible for a man like him, said Shanks. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that you're working for him. I mean, it really took me by surprise when you said that you were working for someone. Someone like you who has 2 of the strongest devil fruits and are one of the 4 emperors. For someone as strong as you to be working for someone else, that person must really be somebody extremely strong. But now finding out that it was Dragon, it doesn't surprise me one bit. Extremely strong is an understatement to describe that man. He was equally as strong as Captain Roger. Said Shanks. Equally as strong as Roger. Zahahaha. How wrong you are. You see, they may have been on par with each other. But that was 20 years ago. Lord Dragon has gotten much stronger since then. He is now the strongest being in the world, said Blackbeard. Shanks could only grit his teeth knowing that Blackbeard was right. And that meant that even if he wanted to stop Dragon, at this point he couldn't. Especially now that he had an entire army backing him. Teach, seeing the despair on Shanks' face, couldn't help but taunt him even more. Zahahaha, I bet now you wish you hadn't saved Luffy's life and gave him your straw hat. After all, he is the son of your captain's greatest enemy, said Teach in a taunting voice. Luffy may be Dragon's son, but he is not Dragon himself. He has done nothing wrong. He is not like Dragon, said Shanks in a firm voice. Oh, is that so? Well, you see, things are different now. He is no longer the little boy whom you gave your hat to. Said Teach still in his taunting voice. You're right, he is not. He is now a man who will return my hat to me and become the king of the pirates. You wouldn't know since you never wanted to be king of the pirates to begin with, said Shanks, countering Blackbeard's statement. Zahahaha. I wouldn't know. I know more than you think. You see, I am a member of Dragon's greatest fighters, the Knights of D. And guess what, Luffy is one of them, said Blackbeard. The look of utter horror was seen clearly on Shanks' face. He could not believe what he just heard. The boy who begged to join his crew and swore to become the king of the pirates was now not only allied with Blackbeard, but a subordinate of the most dangerous being in the world. Just what has happened to him? He kept track of Luffy's whereabouts through the newspapers, and now he finds out that Luffy is one of Dragon's men. Granted, he is Dragon's son, and a son would naturally want to help his father, but this, giving up his dream, abandoning his nakama for a man who once ruled the world. He recently read that his crew, the Straw Hat Pirates, recently became active again, and now he's hearing that Luffy is now with the Revolutionary Army serving under his father. Just what happened in just a month. No, Luffy wouldn't do that. He loves his crew and wants to be the Pirate King. He wouldn't just abandon all that to be part of Dragon's group, said Shanks with a serious voice. I don't know exactly why he chose to leave his crew, but it is no longer important. He is now one of Lord Dragon's elite warriors. And furthermore, Lord Dragon has helped him awaken the will of D, said Teach. The look of shock was apparent on Shanks' face. He knew how powerful the will of D was, having seen his captain harness its power many times to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. To think that Luffy would awaken this ancient and powerful bloodline like Roger. Then again, he shouldn't be surprised. Luffy was always capable of amazing things, and even though he didn't want to admit it, was Dragon's son who himself was a master of this power, if not the greatest master of this ability. And if he was with Dragon, then it would make sense that Luffy awaken it and master it quickly. Despite being incredibly disappointed in Luffy, he couldn't help but feel proud that the boy had come so far. If only he wasn't on the wrong side, then he would have certainly made Pirate King with his new powers. You know, despite how I'm feeling hearing that the little anchor is now on the side of evil, I can't help but feel proud of the brat. Said Shanks, smiling for the first time. What? Asked a confused Teach, whose smile and cocky attitude left him immediately. Why the hell would Shanks be happy about what he just heard about Luffy? It's really strange. I mean, I find out that the boy whom I was willing to even sacrifice my arm for to achieve his dream has given up on it. And even worse, he gave up his dream to help a being whose purpose in life is to destroy everything. But still, I am happy the brat has come far. Even since I met him, I knew he was just like Captain Roger. He was just like him, even more like him than his own son Ace, whom I met before. And he certainly had more in common to Captain Roger than his real father, that bastard Dragon. And now that he has awakened the will of D, he is now even more like him. Yep, he is certainly going to become the Pirate King. I know it. Said Shanks with a real smile on his face. Blackbeard on the other hand was not smiling. He expected Shanks to react badly, but he didn't expect this. He didn't expect that despite what he told him, Shanks still believes that he would become the Pirate King. I just said that he is now a revolutionary, specifically a Knight of D. There is no way in hell that he would want to become the Pirate King now, said Teach, trying to break Shanks again. No, you're wrong, he would become the Pirate King. He just needs some talking to. Or perhaps some sense knocked into him. And guess what, I would be the one to do it, said Shanks with a determined look on his face and his smile never leaving him. And I need to kill your leader for trying to tempt my little anchor into betraying everything that he holds dear. Besides, as Roger's student, I have a duty to my captain to finish the job he started. Not to mention I do have a score to settle with you for what you did to Anchor's brother and Captain Roger's son. Said Shanks. Teach was not happy, not one bit. This confrontation started out exactly like he wanted. He would wear down on Shanks' spirit by revealing his true motives. He hoped that also telling him about Luffy would dampen his spirit even more. The result would be that Shanks would be significantly easier to kill. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Shanks' spirit became stronger upon hearing about Luffy. This fight would be far more difficult than he thought. This was not happening. But nonetheless, he had his orders to complete and he would do so. Well, I think it's time I answered your earlier question. You know, the one about why I'm here. Well, the answer is that Lord Dragon has ordered me to kill you, said Teach, his smile still gone. Well, that's great. Because I wasn't going to let you live in any case. Not after all the terrible things you did under Dragon's orders. And now I want to kill you even more for bad-mouthing Luffy like that. Said Shanks with a confident smile plastered on his face. I'm going to kill you, Teach, finished Shanks, his smile completely gone and his hockey flaring violently, as if saying you'll be burned. His crewmates were also in fighting positions. You can try, red hair, finished Teach as darkness began to envelop him and a transparent bubble appeared on both his hands. The Blackbeard pirates were also in fighting positions. Later that day, Shanks was on the ground. He was just defeated by Teach. Teach, however, was full of injuries himself. He was hoping to avoid this. He was aiming to break Shanks' spirit, but that backfired and made him stronger. So strong that Teach honestly thought he was going to lose. The two fought a huge battle with their respective crews, one that would be remembered for ages. Despite a valiant effort on Shanks' part worthy of a member of the Four Emperors of the Sea, he was defeated. Teach himself had to struggle in this battle like he has never struggled before. It was his toughest fight yet, one which the more it dragged on, the more he felt he was going to lose. Nonetheless, he won and Shanks laid on the ground defeated. Shanks, heavily wounded and on the verge on death, began looking up in the sky. He began to reminisce on all the good memories he had. All the fun times he had with the Roger pirates. Arguing with Buggy, getting bonked in the head by Rayleigh, training with Roger, drinking and partying with his nakama. Battles upon battles that made the crew more than just a crew, it made them family. Captain Roger, Rayleigh-san, Crocus-san, Buggy, guys, thought Shanks, smiling from the memories of his first crew. He then began to think about his own crew. Their adventures and good times. He remembered his frequent duels with Mihawk where the two fought and become both rivals and friends. He remembered Yasopp, Beckman, Lucky Rowe, all of them made him the great pirate that he was today. They were his family. Then, Yasopp, Rowe, Mihawk, everyone thought Shanks, remembering his second crew. The last memory that crossed his mind was one of his most cherished. A memory he held dear. One which he made in Windmill Village. The memory of a small boy who reminded him so much of his captain. I'll form a crew of my own on day, Shanks. And I will become king of the pirates someday, said an enthusiastic 5-year-old Luffy. Ahaha. I see then, in that case, said Shanks, who proceeded to take off his hat. He then gently placed his hat on the little boy's head. You see this hat? It's really precious to me. I want you to take good care of it for me. And return it to me when you become a great pirate. Said Shanks with a gentle smile on his face. Shanks' ship was leaving, but he continued to look at the crowd, specifically the little boy who was in the arms of a woman named Makino. The little boy was crying while he held the hat in his hand. I want you to return the hat to me in good condition. When you become a great pirate. Said Shanks in his mind as Luffy continued staring at each other. As the ship began distancing itself to the port, the two continued to have their eyes fixed on each other, as if in their own little world. We'll meet again too someday, Luffy. And when we do, you'll be the king of the pirates. Said Shanks before the ship was out of view. Little Luffy, who was still crying, couldn't take it anymore. I would do it, Shanks. I would definitely become king of the pirates. You'll see, shouted a crying Luffy. With his back turned, no one could see the tears falling from Shanks' eyes as he smiled. Captain Roger, you would definitely be happy if you saw this though, Shanks. Shanks was finally back to the present as his eyes were now tearing from all the wonderful times he had. Luffy, I know that you are struggling. Dragon has manipulated you to do his bidding. But I know you, Luffy, you'll pull through. "You'll definitely become king of the pirates," thought Shanks as tears were spilling from his eyes. "My one regret is that I wouldn't be alive to see it happen," thought Shanks, thinking about his one regret. "Luffy, everyone. Thank you though," Shanks with a smile on his face as he finally collapsed from his wounds. It has finally happened. Red Hair Shanks, captain of the Red Hair Pirates, formerly a member of the Pirate King's crew and member of the Four Emperor of the Sea, was dead. The rest of his crew looked on, all them crying at the loss of their captain and friend. In another part of the New World, Monkey D. Luffy, son of the revolutionary leader Dragon and the Libra of the Knights of D, was currently pursuing Big Mom of the Four Emperors of the Sea. He was ordered to kill her. While traveling, he got a strange feeling. A feeling as if someone was touching his shoulder. He looked behind and saw no one. Yet for some reason he couldn't help but think of his mentor and friend Shanks. Despite having cast aside his past upon joining the Revolutionary Army, he still held his precious people in high regards. Shanks included. Shanks thought Luffy, though he didn't know why. Nonetheless, he had to continue his mission to kill Big Mom. As a member of the Knights of D, failure wasn't an option. Yet still on the way, he couldn't help his mind from wandering to Shanks. There's it, guys. The latest chapter. Well, first, I know a lot of you are getting frustrated that you haven't seen any of the Straw Hats yet. I mean, this is One Piece, and One Piece is about the Straw Hats. But this is the final war, so again I'll have to give all the necessary characters their due. Next, about if an emperor goes into another emperor's territory without permission is a declaration of war. I just made this up. But it would make sense. I mean, two of the strongest pirates in the world in the same place. Something is bound to happen. Also, when Shanks came to Whitebeard. Whitebeard knew Shanks when he was a brat and knew he wouldn't just come here for a fight without good reason. That's why there was no way between the two. Continuing on, the first part of this chapter was more or less the calm before the storm. A party before a dreadful even happens. And this dreadful event would be the battle between Shanks and Teach, which result in Shanks' death. About Shanks' feeling. Well, Luffy does have a sixth sense for danger. And since the series emphasizes the similarities between Luffy and Roger and Luffy and Shanks, then Shanks should have a similar sixth sense for danger or terrible events. Blackbeard taunting. Well, Blackbeard does have a habit of conversing with his enemies, even extremely strong ones, which is what he was going here. A lot of Blackbeard actions during the war were not necessarily Dragon's orders. For example, Dragon simply told Teach to hand Ace over to the world government. He never said how. Blackbeard was the one who came up with a scheme to kill a crewmate and have Ace pursue him, knowing Ace's code. Also, certain things were just bonuses. Dragon simply wanted Blackbeard to turn Ace over to the world government, prompting the Whitebeard pirates to go to war. And then in the middle he would kill Ace because he is the son of his mortal enemy, and Whitebeard to become a Yonko. Becoming a Shichibukai wasn't necessary for the Whitebeard pirates to go to war, turning Ace over was all that was needed. Breaking into Impel Down and getting new crewmates was not necessary to kill Whitebeard. But both made his job easier, as the Shichibukai title would make getting into Impel Down easier and sneaking into Marineford easier. Getting new crewmates would bolster his crew but wouldn't affect Dragon's plans. It would, however, make his crew stronger and thus more of a competitor to becoming an emperor, as well as by extension, make the Revolutionary Army stronger. Also, stealing Whitebeard's devil fruit was not necessary, but it was a bonus. It would make him stronger and thus more likely to become an emperor. And him becoming stronger would naturally mean the Knights of D are stronger. Again, most of his actions were not necessary but optional. Dragon suspected Shanks would enter the war of the best, knowing him from Roger's crew. So he ordered Teach not to engage him. Of course, Teach knows how strong Shanks is, so he wouldn't have fought him anyway, unless specifically ordered to by Dragon. So the nature of the battle between Dragon and Roger is finally revealed. Dragon attempted to unleash the ancient weapon Uranus onto the world. But Roger was able to stop him, however he didn't kill him. And now Dragon is back stronger than ever. Roger didn't kill him for more or less the same reasons Luffy doesn't kill his enemies. Shanks didn't pursue Dragon at first because of what Dragon was doing. Dragon was already defeated by Roger and prevented from unleashing Uranus. Also, Dragon was doing things like liberating lands and freeing people from slavery. He was doing anything bad, so there was no reason for Shanks to pursue him. In fact, because of the things he was doing were good things, Shanks thought Dragon turned over a new leaf. How wrong he was. Teach attempted to first weaken Shanks' spirit by telling him about his true motives and about Luffy. This would make it easier to kill him, as he knows Shanks is a strong fighter. Unfortunately, that plan backfired badly, and Shanks is even stronger than he was before. Teach did not see that coming, so the fight was even harder than he imagined. Shanks' reaction to hearing about Luffy. Well, Luffy wasn't the type to just cry and wallow in misery after hearing about his crewmates. He is the type who would more smile and beat up whoever was responsible. Shanks, who is similar to Luffy, is the same. Rather than despairing about how Luffy joined Dragon, he would smile and defeat Dragon for tempting Luffy. But first he has to defeat Blackbeard, who was partially responsible for the death of his captain So Ace and bad-mouthing Luffy. The Straw Hats were continuing to sail through the seas of the New World on board the Thousand Sunny. However, there were several changes that were noticeable from the past month. The first and biggest change was the absence of perhaps the most important crew member. The founder of the Straw Hat Pirates and ex-captain, Monkey D. Luffy. The second change was as a result of Luffy's absence. It was the attitude of the crew. Despite the crew still acting their usual selves. For example, Zoro still sleeping and training, Sanji still cooking and flirting with the ladies, Nami and Robin sunbathing and reading and bonking idiotic crew members, Frankie still working on his inventions, Usopp working on his weapons, including his plant-like ones, and Chopper making medicine. It seemed as if Luffy leaving just sucked the life out of the crew. Before, the crew was chaotic, loud and fun. Now the crew just traveled in a much more somber mood. Without Luffy, Usopp and Chopper don't have as much fun as before. As a result, there is much less noise disturbing Nami and Robin from reading or having peace and quiet, who both ever since Luffy left wished more than anything to have their rubber savior return, or at least see him again. Also, meal times were significantly quieter now that they were not defending their food from thieving rubber hands. All in all, the crew was not the same as it used to be. "Everyone, please gather around," said Robin. "What is it, Robin?" "Found something interesting," said Frankie. "Yeah, Robin, what is it that could have you calling for all of us?" asked Usopp. "What is it, Robin-chan?" asked Sanji in a flirting voice, though not exaggerated by his usual heart-shaped eyes and useless love poetry. "You're not going to believe what I just found in the papers," said Robin in a serious voice. "Well, what is it, Robin?" said Nami, also curious as to what could have her one Isama like this. Sanji, seeing Nami in a curious mood, couldn't help but throw a love line at Nami. But the perverted look on his face, Nami-san is beautiful when she is curious. Seeing this, Zoro couldn't help but throw his line in. "Stop being such a perverted Iro cook. And that wicked witch of the sea is only ever really curious about money," said Zoro with a bored look. Hearing this, Sanji couldn't help but leave his love mode whenever his nemesis Zoro ever said anything. "You said something, seaweed," said Sanji in his usual rude and challenging voice whenever talking to Zoro. "I said that you're a perverted Iro cook." "What's the matter, wax in your ears?" replied Zoro, ready to take the cook on. "You better watch what you say, Marimo, before I kick your ass," said Sanji, ready to make good use of the skills he gained on Akama Paradise. Zoro was silent for a moment before he replied. "I think I'll back down this time," said Zoro. Sanji, however, was shocked. "Since when does the muscle freak ever back down from fighting him?" What he said in a shocked voice. "You heard me. I think I'll back down. After all, I don't want all your germs from flirting instead of showering come onto me. That's why you have all that wax," said Zoro in a bored voice. Sanji, however, gritted his teeth. Of course it was something like this. He should have expected as much. Sanji was ready to start a fight when he suddenly stopped. "Gee, like you want to talk. All you do is lift weights and sleep all day. And with all that sweat nonetheless," said Sanji, countering Zoro's argument. "What?" shouted Zoro with a comically angry face before the two went into an all-out brawl, before it was violently interrupted courtesy of Nami's fist. "That's enough from you two," said Nami, who had her fist smoking. Likewise, Zoro and Sanji were both on the floor with huge bumps on their heads. "Anyway, continue, Robin," said Nami, turning her attention to Robin. "HHHHH," shouted Sanji. What is it, Sanji-san?" said Brook, looking around. "I forgot, you called Nami-san a wicked witch of the sea." "I'll kick your ass," shouted Sanji. All the Straw Hats had sweat drops on their heads, with the exception of Zoro, who was battling Sanji as per usual. Both were knocked out again and had second bumps on their heads, this time not from Nami, but from unexpectedly Chopper. "That's enough, you two," shouted Chopper. The crew all looked at Chopper strangely. Meanwhile, Chopper, who just realized what he had done, went immediately nervous, thinking Zoro was going to chop him up and Sanji was going to cook him. "Arg. What have I done? Now I'm gonna die." "I don't wanna die," shouted Chopper hysterically while running around. "That's alright, Chopper. You were wonderful," said Robin in a soothing and grateful voice, both to compliment him for his deed and out of gratefulness for stopping the distraction. "Anyway, continue, Robin. And none of you better interrupt her," said Nami in a warning voice. "Well, as I was saying, the newspapers had several articles, but two of them were really big. Both have worldwide implications," said Robin in a serious voice. "So what are they, Robin-chan?" said Sanji, now generally curious. 3 of the 4 emperors of the sea were murdered," said Robin, finally letting out the bombshell news. "What?" shouted all the crew members. "Here's the article, everyone," said Robin as she read the newspaper article to everyone. "THTH 3 emperors. Dead all at once," said Usopp, shivering. "The 4 emperors of the sea are the 4 strongest pirates in the world. Just one of them dying is big. And you're saying not one but three of them were killed, said Frankie, who couldn't help the sweat coming down his face. Anyway, Robin, which three exactly, said Zoro, who too was intrigued at this serious development. Red Hair, Kaido and Big Mom were all murdered in the same time frame, answered Robin seriously. That's just hard to believe. The emperors were supposed to be extremely strong. To think that three would be killed so quickly. Whoever did it must be unbelievable strong, said Sanji, whose cigarette has left his mouth since hearing the news. Robin, said Zoro, calling out to the archaeologist. What is it, swordsman-san, replied Robin. You said that they all died at the same time. I don't think that is coincidence. Someone must have planned to have all three of them assassinated at the same time, said Zoro. I drew the same conclusion, said Robin. It would suggest that there were three parties involved with the murder of the emperors. Or it could have simply been three people who individually murdered each emperor, said Robin ominously. But it's really scary. If what you say is true, then there are three people out there who are strong enough to kill an emperor, said Nami, who was scared out of her mind. She believed that after the 2 years of training that they would be able to handle any obstacle, but even she did not believe that they could handle an emperor, yet much less three people who could kill one. Everyone, what do we do if we run into any of those guys, said Brook, voicing a question that everyone subconsciously thought about. I'm scared, you guys, shouted a scared Chopper and Usopp. The crew was all silent. Normally they would be perfectly willing to handle any enemy who comes their way, but even they were not too sure about this new and obviously dangerous threat. Despite their training for 2 years, even they were reluctant to face not one but three foes whose power exceeded that of an emperor's. We'll run, said Zoro seriously. What, shouted the crew again, as the thought of Zoro, member of the monster duo, now that Luffy is gone, would suggest running. What did you say, Marimo, said Sanji, who was shocked that his rival, who was a monster, would suggest running. Normally I wouldn't. But this is an enemy that is too much for us. Even with our training, I don't think it would be enough to take on whoever these guys are. Especially now that Luffy's gone, said Zoro, stated the reason for his decision. The crew had to agree on that one. Luffy was their strongest fighter, and now he's gone. In fact, the crew always believed they would come out on top specifically because of Luffy's strength and determination, and now that he's gone, the crew just didn't feel they could take on someone like that. So they agreed that running would be the best choice. We'll run, but if we're concerned or have no choice, we'll fight, but that's only if we have no choice, said Zoro. That would probably be the best decision, said Robin. But this is something that would really change the world now. The Emperors is one of the three great powers of the world that maintain stability. Just losing one of them would plunge the world into chaos, which is what happened when Whitebeard died. And now three of them are dead. The world would probably never be the same after this, said Robin. The rest of the crew knew this to be true and knew that the world would never be the same. Then Zoro remembered something important. Boy, Robin, isn't Shanks also known as Red Hair of the Four Emperors, asked Zoro, even though he knew the answer already. Yes, he is, answered Robin. And Shanks was the one who gave Luffy his hat, then continued Zoro, who did not wish to finish the sentence. However, he didn't need to finish it off, as one thought crossed all of the minds of the Straw Hats. Luffy thought all members of the crew. Oh my god, Luffy, cried Nami, whose hand was covering her mouth. Luffy really admired Red Hair, and he was the one who gave him his straw hat, said Robin, whose hand was on her chest, and you could see tears forming in her eyes. Luffy, said Usopp, who too was crying. Luffy, cried Chopper, who was never one to hide his emotions. Zoro, Sanji, Frankie and Brook all had their heads down thinking about Luffy and what he was going through now. First his brother Ace, now his friend Shanks. Is there no end to it, said Sanji, who too was pained at what Luffy must be going through. Despite his actions at making Luffy leave and always beating up on him, even he didn't want this. Straw Hat, what are you going through, said Frankie, whose voice was soft unlike its usual super tone. Luffy-san, said Brook, who is intimately familiar with the pain of loss. Zoro was silent, but if you look closer you could see the sadness in his eyes. He, like everyone, knows that Luffy is suffering incredibly, having lost two people dear to him. Zoro really wished that Luffy never left the crew, that way he could be here where he belongs, and where he could be supported by his crew. Robin, said Usopp timidly. Yes, Longnose-kun, said Robin, who was still grieving over Luffy. I don't want to sound selfish over what Luffy's going through right now, but what about my father Yasopp? He is a member of the Red Hair Pirates, so what about him, asked Usopp, wanting to know about his father. Wiping away the tears, Robin answered Usopp. No, it's alright, Longnose-kun. Anyway, the article listed not only the emperors themselves, but also important subordinates of theirs who were also killed. Your father's name wasn't in the article, so for now we could assume that he's alive, said Robin. Usopp couldn't contain his tears. First there was the tears from finding out Luffy's pain, and now the relief that his father might be alive. Thank God, was all Usopp could say. The rest of the crew couldn't help but smile. They were happy that they were able to at least avoid one tragedy befall their Nakama. though it didn't change the fact that another was probably out there still grieving. Robin decided it was time to move on. "Anyway everyone, there is one more article you should all be aware of," said Robin. The rest of the crew got out of their moods, knowing that they would have to pay attention. It was a lot to take in. Finding out 3 emperors are dead, knowing that they could quite possibly run into the powerful killers, and now knowing that a Nakama is out there all alone and suffering, and they could do nothing about it. But they knew they had to listen to what Robin has to say. The large number of revolutionaries were killed in a short time. At around the same time of the death of the 3 emperors. "You're kidding me," said Usopp. "Revolutionaries were killed," shouted Brook. "What the hell is going on? First 3 emperors are dead and now revolutionaries are being killed. Just what on earth is happening?" shouted Frankie, who too could not believe the news. Sanji took out his cigarette to blow out some smoke. "In just a month so much happened," said Sanji, blowing out smoke. "It doesn't matter," said Zoro with finality. "Zoro, how could you say that? Those guys just got killed like that," said Nami, who is angry at Zoro's dismissal tone. "That's right, Marimo. Don't you have a heart?" shouted Sanji, who probably only did it to side with Nami. "It's just as I said. It doesn't matter. We're not revolutionaries and we don't know any of the people. So why should we care?" said Zoro as a matter of factly. "Because," said Robin, who stopped her sentence. Sanji, hearing the tone of Robin's voice, couldn't help but turn to her. "What's wrong, Robin-chan?" asked Sanji softly. "It's because I was part of the revolutionary army," said Robin softly. "What?" shouted the entire crew. "Robin-chan, you're part of the revolutionary army?" asked a surprised Sanji. "Robin, how could you have not told any of us?" asked an equally surprised Nami. "Robin, don't just sit there, answer us," asked Usopp. "Yeah, Robin, please," asked Chopper. "Nico, Robin," asked Frankie. "Robin-san," asked Brook. Only Zoro was silent, but his expression clearly said that he too wanted answers. "Well, I was not part of the revolutionary army per se. I simply stayed with them during the 2 years to get stronger. And after the 2 years I would return to the crew. I never became an actual revolutionary," explained Robin. The crew all nodded and accepted that as an answer. That seemed to make sense. "I simply stayed with them and I did become close to them. Not anywhere as close to them as I am with you all, but still close. And since they were subordinates of Luffy's father, then I figured I could trust them." The crew nodded again, indicating they understood. They have to admit, if the leader was Luffy's father, then they honestly believed he could be trusted with the life of one of their Nakama. And it seemed he came through. "I wasn't that close to them since my mind was set on becoming stronger and returning to the crew. Several of the names mentioned are commanders whom I met in the past. And they all seemed like good people dedicated to Dragon-san and their cause. I can't say that I mourn them a lot since I was never really close to them, but it still pains me that they are all dead," said Robin softly. "If I ever do run into them, I will not go easy, that's for sure," finished Robin with a determined voice. The crew all could understand. Robin was with them for 2 years, so some kind of bond had to have been formed. And while they could tell that Robin didn't grieve much over their deaths, it still affected and hurt her. And it was natural that she should want revenge if she ever runs into the murderers. Nonetheless, she was with the crew and they would do everything they could to help her and ease her pain. Sanji, upon hearing Robin mention the word commander, was reminded of something and had to ask. "Robin-chan, one question I wish to asked Sanji. "Yes, what is it, Cook-san?" answered Robin. "That article you read. About those revolutionaries that died, tell me," said Sanji, who now had his eyes shadowed. The crew all looked at Sanji, wondering what he wanted to know about the revolutionaries. Furthermore, why was he so serious? "Was Ivankov one of those revolutionaries who died?" asked Sanji, his eyes still shadowed by his hair. "Of course, Angie was on the Nakama Island with Ivankov," said Chopper, finally picking up why he asked that question. "Oh, I see, so that's why," said Brook in response. Robin was silent for a moment. She knew she would be telling him bad news, but still it was hard. Especially telling it to a Nakama who she cared about. "Yes, Revolutionary Commander Ivankov was one of those who were killed," said Robin in a solemn and regrettable voice. Sanji was silent for a few moments. "I see," Sanji finally said. "Anyway, thank you, Robin-chan. Anyway, I'll go prepare dinner," said Sanji, who finally left to go to the kitchen and prepare dinner. "Sanji-kun, wait," Nami called out. "Wait, hold on, Nami," said Zoro, who grabbed Nami's hand. "But Zoro," said Nami, who was angry that Zoro stopped her. "Leave the cook alone. He needs time to mourn. He's not the type to show his emotions in front of others. Let's leave him alone. He'll come out when he's ready. Besides, he's a fighter. Do you know how bad he'll feel if he's pitied as well? And worse of all by you or Robin, his beautiful ladies," said Zoro wisely. Nami looked down, knowing that Zoro was right. But still she wanted to comfort Sanji, who was her Nakama. "Let it go for Nami. Wait until the right time," Zoro finished. Nami decided to do what Zoro said and wait for when he's ready. A little later at dinner, the mood was quiet. Of course meals were significantly more quieter than usual, which was something because ever since Luffy's departure, meals were fairly quiet and civilized, mainly due to Luffy's absence. But even by those standards, it was extremely quiet. And for good reason. A lot of big news was revealed today. First, the killings of 3 emperors, the deaths of the revolutionaries and the consequences for all the deaths in the papers was weighing down heavily on each member of the Straw Hats. "I was never really that close to Ivankov," said Sanji, finally breaking the silence. "I asked each of the Straw Hats, some verbally, others like Zoro and Robin more subtlety. I was never really close to Ivankov, so I can't really say that I'm sad for his death. However, I did train for 2 years on his island and it's thanks to him that I learned all those new recipes. Not to mention I'm a lot stronger because of my training with him so that I can help the crew better. So I do owe him a lot." Sanji said, finally explaining his feelings. "I am sad for his death, but I can't let that get in the way of my cooking and the crew, along with beating up that shitty Marimo," Sanji said with a smile. The crew all smiled, happy that at least Sanji was okay. Zoro, however, couldn't help the smile on his face. It's always amazing how much a good fight can make someone feel. "Anyway, I do now. If I find those bastards who murdered him, they are going to pay. That I swear. As much as I hate to admit it, I respected Ivankov and he was my friend, so if I find those responsible, they are going to get the ass beating of their lives," said Sanji with a determined look. "You're not the only on Cook-san. I too have grievances with those men. Be sure to kick them for me," said Robin softly with a charming smile. "Of course, Robin-chan," said Sanji in a mild flirt voice, since both of them were on the same page having issues with those people. Aka Cook thinks he's going to get together with Robin over him using his crappy kicking. "Like that'll ever happen," said Zoro, who once again has to pick a fight with the cook, though this one was more about friendship than their usual fights. "Care to repeat what you just said about my kicking?" said Sanji, who turned to Zoro. "I said you have crappy kicking," said Zoro with a smug look. And as usual, a fight broke out between the two and dinner seemed more lively than usual. A little bit after the fight was over between the two, Sanji finally had to say something else on his mind. "But there is one other thing," said Sanji. "Well, Cook, what is it? Don't keep us waiting," said Zoro, knowing Sanji was talking about the Ivankov issue. "Well, when I was training, I spoke to Ivankov about the war. That guy fought alongside Luffy during that big war. And because of that I got to hear about what Luffy really went through during that great war," said Sanji. The crew all grew silent as they listened to Sanji continue. The fact that they did not know everything about the war beyond the papers and what their dear captain went through always got to them. They all wanted Luffy to talk, but chose not to, knowing that it was a very sensitive topic since he lost his brother. Zoro likewise was interested because he too got in-depth knowledge on the war from Mihawk, who was a major participant. However, he was on the opposing side, so hear the cook talk about Ivankov, who was on Luffy's side, was something he wanted to hear. Turns out that Ivankov was a major ally of Luffy during his break into Impel Down. He even saved his life. He was also helping him during the war itself. He and Luffy were really close because he was there for Luffy during Ace's death, protecting him. Luffy and him were definitely a lot closer than I was because of all they went through. So he's going to take Ivankov's death much harder. At this, the crew just realized the implications of what Sanji just said. Luffy lost Ace during the war. Now he lost his great friend and mentor Shanks, and now he's lost his comrade Ivankov. He's lost so much people in such a short space of time. It was just not fair. "Luffy, oh my god, Luffy," said Nami, who was crying. Robin turned to hug Nami. There Nami, it's alright," comforted Robin. Usopp and Chopper were both crying, knowing that Luffy was suffering even more. Zoro, Frankie and Brook both had similar feelings in their hearts over what Luffy was now going through. It was like ever since he left the crew, everything terrible has happened to him. At night in the girls' room, Nami was inside alone. However, she was not changing or anything like that. Instead, she was silently crying. "Luffy, you have lost so much. First Ace, now Shanks and then Ivankov. Why did you leave? If only you stayed, I could have been there to comfort you during your time of need. And it's my fault that you left. God, Luffy, I'm so sorry," thought Nami with tears in her eyes. "Nami," Robin called out in a soft voice. "Robin, you're here," said Nami, who quickly tried to wipe the tears out of her eyes. "Na-chan, what is? Talk to me." Robin resorted to using Nami's nickname. "It's nothing, Robin." Onasama Nami likewise resorted to using Robin's nickname. "You can tell me. Don't we always talk to each other?" said Robin. Nami was silent for a moment. "It's about Luffy, isn't it?" Robin finally said with a tone of emotion to show how much she wanted her to talk. "Luffy's been through so much. First his brother Ace, then Shanks and now Ivankov. He just keeps on losing people so fast. It's just not fair." Said Nami, finally stating what is on her mind. "But life isn't fair, Nami. You and I of all people should know that. We can both say that from personal experience." Said Robin, stating the truth. Nami looked down knowing that Robin was right. Life wasn't fair. The fact that she lost Bellamira and became a slave under her murderer for 8 years was proof of that. And Nami knew that Robin lost of her island and was on the run from the world government for 20 years. Life just wasn't fair. But there was light in the darkness. And that light was their Nakama. And Luffy was the brightest light out there. And now his light was cruelly being faded away. It's my fault. That day if only I didn't explode none of this would have happened. Nami confessed. No Nami, that's not true, and you know it. Said Robin. But it is, Luffy left because of me. After everything he did for me. After freeing me and my village from Arlong, I repay him by making him leave the crew. And now he's out there alone suffering and it's because of me. Me the one who betrayed him and yet still saved. Nami said with tears flowing freely. Nami, no one could have predicted that Luffy would have left, so don't blame yourself. You forget I too owe Luffy everything. When I wanted to die, he saved me and welcomed me with open arms. And he saved me from the world government, even going so far as declaring war on the world government solely for my sake. He freed me from my past. I owe him everything, and yet I couldn't do a thing to stop him from leaving. Robin stated as she too began crying. Robin Nami couldn't help but say. This was the first time besides the Enies Lobby incident that she's seen her older sister with so much emotion. Nami, you aren't the only one suffering. I am too. I also want to be there for the boy who saved me in his time of need, but I can't. Nami, you aren't the only one. Robin said with tears coming from her eyes, which was an unusual sight. But that the two women who both owed the rubber boy so much hugged each other. Their hearts were connected by the fact that it went out to the same boy or man and that he held it despite neither ever admitting it. Luffy's done so much for both of us. Not just us, but the others. Everyone we met on our journey was helped by Luffy somehow. He's always helping others. And now when he needs help I know we can't help him, said Nami, who was still crying, but her tears were easing knowing Robin had similar feelings. It's just like 2 years ago. He lost his brother and neither of us nor his crew were anywhere near him to support him. And now it's the same thing. Again he has to bear the burden of losing his friends alone. I just can't stand it, said Nami. It's alright Nami, it's alright. We both want to help me. And the crew does as well. Even though he left on his own accord he can still return. And when we find him, he wouldn't be alone anymore. Notch and we'll both be with him to help him just like he's done for us. So we'll have to be strong. Not just for our sakes, but the crew's and especially for Luffy, said Robin. Thanks Robin, said a grateful Nami. Anytime Nami, replied Nami. But that the two women gave each other a warm sisterly hug after getting their feelings off their chest. Inside a vast fortress. Monkey D. Dragon was sitting on top his throne. In front were his greatest subordinate, the powerful and dreaded leader of the Knights of D, the Sagittarius Sigma D. Ren. The purging is complete, my lord, stated Ren. Excellent. Those fools who lack the drive to do what is necessary would only get in the way. They deserve to be eliminated, stated Dragon. Also the 3 emperors that would oppose us have all been dealt with. Luffy successful killed Big Mom, I took out Kaido, and Blackbeard killed Shanks, stated Ren. I see. Everyone succeeded. Our greatest threats have been eliminated. Of course there are several others who need to be taken out. Rayleigh, my father Garp and a few others still pose a great threat to the army. But they can be taken out after the coming invasion. For now only those emperors were our main concern, stated Dragon. Anyway, speaking, how is Luffy, asked Dragon. He is in a terrible mood, Lord Dragon, replied Ren. I see. Well, that is to be expected. After all, he was close to Shanks, Ivankov and Inzamu. So having lost all 3 of them would do that to him. Nonetheless, he is undoubtedly filled with rage. That rage would be harnessed during the invasion, said Dragon. Emotions can be a powerful weapon when used properly. And Luffy has more of it than any other member of the Knights. His emotions would be put to good use during the invasion, said Dragon. Also, revelry is taking place in a few days, my lord. Now that the emperors have fallen and the army purged of its weak, all preparations have been completed. All the Knights of D are ready and prepared to move out. We are ready for the invasion taking place in a few days. They are all awaiting your orders. Dragon then smiled and got off his throne. I see. Well then, shall we go, asked Dragon, getting up from his throne. Everything that we have done has come to this point. The past 20 years were all devoted to this one moment. The moment when everything shall be set right. Everything shall be made the way it should be, said Dragon in a commanding tone. Ren, Dragon called out. My lord, answered Ren in a respectful tone. Notify the Knights of D, commanded Dragon. As you wish, my lord, replied Ren with a bow. The revolutionary army will now invade the holy land of Mariagewa, said Dragon, with his green cloak flowing. So everyone, what do you think? The revolutionary army is now on the move, and Dragon has ordered the Knights of D to invade Mariagewa. Also some notes. This fic is a harem fic, so I naturally added some Namixlafixribbon. Of course neither of the girls blatantly admitted to loving him or are blushing or anything, but you could see the signs that they love Luffy present. I know a lot of you expected the crew to have a reaction to Big Mom's death since Luffy declared war on her. But that was overshadowed by the fact that 3 emperors died at the same time. And one of them is Luffy's friend Shanks. Unfortunately this chapter turned out very similar to its counterpart in my other fic One Piece Shippuden. My bad, but considering both are very similar it was bound to happen. Robin was with the Revolutionary Army for 2 years, so I would assume that she would have been close to some of them, so it's only natural that she would mourn them. However, she wasn't really tight with them as she was with the Straw Hats, so she would not grieve too much. Also, she wouldn't go all Avenger and kill everyone she meets. She'll only bear a grudge on whoever killed the revolutionaries. Robin joined because they called her the light of the revolution. Also because since the leader was Luffy's father, she figured he could be trusted. She doesn't know about his true nature. And she never met any of the knights. They were kept secret even in the army itself. Sanji likewise would mourn Ivankov but not much. He didn't seem that close or tight with Ivankov, but he would naturally be sad, though not too sad. He would not go hunting down the killer, but he would not go easy on the murderers. I decided not to have Usopp's father Yasopp. I don't want him to start acting hateful or such because of his father's death. The only Avenger-like member of the Straw Hats would be Luffy himself. Having Robin, Sanji and Usopp have grudges would complicate the plot too much. The main point of the Straw Hats are bonds and wanting to save their Nakama Luffy, not on revenge of things like that. That is Luffy's task. Sanji felt better after a good fight with Zoro. He secretly approached him privately, and a fight was all it took to make him feel better. That's why Sanji was able to talk during dinner. I'm pretty sure Ivankov told Sanji about the events of the war. He and Zoro know more about the war than anyone else. Well, most of the crew read about the war in the papers. Zoro and Sanji were training with people who actually fought in the war, mainly Ivankov and Mihawk. However, Zoro was told about the war from Mihawk's perspective, in other words, any enemy's perspective since he was on the world government side. Sanji got it from Ivankov's perspective, a comrade's perspective since he was on Luffy's side. I know Zoro isn't one to suggest running. But even he knows the dangers that an emperor poses. Furthermore, the enemy are 3 beings who are strong enough to kill an emperor, so Zoro would realize that even that would be too much, even with the crew's training. Furthermore, even he realizes that the crew has weakened in power, thanks to the fact that its strongest member Luffy is gone. Also, Luffy was the pillar of strength, so his leaving further weakens the crew. There are other people who pose a threat to Dragon. Garp and Rayleigh are just 2 of them. They would be dealt with in time. However, the emperors were bigger and more urgent threats. The remaining threats would be taken out later after the invasion. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the unknown EPSFN for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.